What if the woman being laughed at in a bridal store was actually the wife of the man who owns the entire empire? They mocked her shoes, they filmed her silence, they thought she was no one, until the man watching from the black SUV outside walked through the doors and shut everything down. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's a story about quiet dignity, power without noise, and a crown that was never worn, but earned. The bell above the glass door gave a delicate chime as Lily stepped into the bridal boutique, her breath catching slightly from the sudden burst of air-conditioned chill. Her shoes, plain white canvas, worn thin from years of use, squeaked softly against the marble floors. Every surface inside Seraphine Bridal gleamed. Crystal chandeliers glittered above rows of satin and lace. Velvet armchairs lined the walls, each one occupied by women who smelled like money and roses. Conversations halted for a fraction of a second, as eyes turned toward the woman in the simple beige coat. She didn't have the posture of someone who belonged here. Her braid was neatly tied but unstyled, her hands carried the faint scent of flour and soap, and her bag was canvas, not leather. Clarice, the lead consultant, spotted her from across the showroom and instinctively pressed her lips into a smile so tight it could snap. She walked over with measured steps and a clipboard clutched like a shield. "Welcome to Seraphine," she said, voice wrapped in the kind of politeness used for lost tourists. "Can I help you with something?" Lily offered a quiet smile. "I have a 10:30 appointment." Clarice's smile didn't falter, but her brow rose. "Really?" A moment's hesitation, a flicker of doubt, then she flipped through her schedule. Her smile returned, only thinner this time. "Ah, yes, Miss Lily." She paused on the name, like it tasted unfamiliar. "Right this way." They passed rows of gowns, each one draped in its own glass casing like a museum piece. Lily glanced at the price tags. 10,000, 15, 22. Clarice noticed the glance and murmured, "We do have off-rack samples in the back, if that's more comfortable." Lily said nothing. She didn't come here to argue. She came to find something simple, elegant, and honest. A gown, yes, but more than that. A memory worth holding. They reached the private fitting area, and Clarice gestured to a small pedestal surrounded by mirrors. "Wait here, I'll fetch a few options." As she turned to leave, Lily heard it. A soft snicker. Two girls sitting by the window, flipping through wedding magazines. One whispered to the other, just loud enough, "Is she here to clean the floors?" The other stifled laughter. Maybe she's marrying a janitor, or she's auditioning for a charity wedding special. Clarice didn't stop them, didn't correct them. She simply returned moments later with a dress folded over her arm and said, "We'll start with something modest." Lily stepped into the dressing room. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unbuttoned her coat. She thought of Alex, his warm eyes, the quiet way he looked at her like she was made of stardust and story. He had told her to come here, said, "Pick the one that makes you feel like you, not like someone they expect." But standing under those fluorescent lights, surrounded by silence steeped in judgment, Lily wasn't sure who she felt like anymore. She stepped into the gown. It was beautiful, if overly embellished. The lace scratched her skin. Clarice stood outside, tapping her foot. "Are you ready?" Lily opened the door and stepped onto the pedestal. Silence fell. Clarice pursed her lips. The girls by the window giggled again. "Maybe skip the dress and just wear the tag," one said. "That's probably all she can afford." Lily didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She looked at herself in the mirror, alone, under the weight of their mockery, and stood a little taller. She didn't need them to see her. She just needed to remember who she really was. And outside, a black car had just parked across the street, its engine still warm. The man inside checked his watch, adjusted his cuff, and looked through the glass at the woman being mocked for wearing cotton shoes. She was his wife, and none of them had any idea. The silence in the room was thick, but it wasn't empty. It was full of smirks, of barely hidden giggles, of eyes that flicked to price tags and then back to Lily with amusement. Clarice walked in slow circles around her, arms folded, inspecting the dress on Lily as if she were evaluating a dish she already knew she'd send back. "You're petite," she said finally, voice syrupy and sharp. "And this style wasn't designed for someone with your proportions. But it's cute, in a plain way." One of the bridesmaids in the corner giggled. "Maybe add a tiara. She'll look like a fairy tale, if the story was written by the Salvation Army." Lily glanced at her reflection. The dress didn't fit right. It clung in the wrong places and sagged in others. But it wasn't the fabric that made her want to hide. It was the way she was being watched like a child pretending to be a bride. Clarice suddenly clapped once, loud and crisp. Okay, let's try something else. But do be careful when undressing. We charge for damaged zippers. She handed Lily another gown, thinner silk, more delicate lace. This one's almost $7,000. It's far beyond your budget, I assume. But let's call this a Cinderella moment, shall we? Lily took it without flinching and returned to the dressing room. As she closed the door, she took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly now. She thought about leaving, about tossing the dress onto the floor and walking out barefoot. But then her phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "Call me when you're done. I miss your face already." Lily stared at the text, her breath catching in her chest. She could picture him, sitting in some boardroom, ignoring calls from bankers, and thinking only of whether she found something she liked. She turned off the screen and placed the phone face down. She couldn't let this place ruin something sacred. Back on the pedestal in gown number 2, she stood straighter. Clarice's face wrinkled. No, no, no. That neckline swallows you whole. And the sleeves? Please. You look like you borrowed it from your grandma's attic. The girls by the window didn't even pretend to whisper now. Try a curtain next time. Might fit better. The laughter rolled over her like cold wind. One of them pulled out a phone and aimed it at Lily. This is too good not to record. Look at her face. She thinks she's Meghan Markle. Clarice didn't stop her. She smirked instead. Let's not be too harsh. Some people dress for the life they want, even if they can't afford the mirror. The girl filming snorted. What does her man do again? Drive for Uber? Deliver groceries? Lily's voice, quiet but clear, cut through the room. He builds empires. They froze. Clarice blinked. I'm sorry? Lily turned slowly to face her. You asked what my man does. He builds empires. But that's not why I'm marrying him. Clarice raised a skeptical brow. Oh, then what's the reason? Charity? Lily didn't answer. She didn't owe them that. Instead, she stepped down from the pedestal, lifted the hem of the dress slightly to keep it from dragging, and walked back to the changing room, not with shame, but with purpose. But as she closed the door, a voice behind her rang out. Careful with that dress. You can't afford it if it tears. And next time, sweetheart, try David's Bridal. You'll find your people there. Outside, the man in the black car was still watching. His hand hovered over his phone. He had seen enough. And soon, so would they. Lily sat on the cushioned bench inside the changing room, her fingers tangled in the layers of silk now bunched awkwardly around her knees. The light above her flickered slightly, casting uneven shadows across the mirror. For a long moment, she stared at her reflection. The same tired eyes, the same soft mouth trying not to tremble, the same girl who used to dream of wedding dresses made of clouds and violins. She took a deep breath, then reached into her coat pocket for her phone. A missed call. Alex. She didn't press redial, not yet. She couldn't bring herself to let that world bleed into this one, not while she was still in their dressing room, still wearing their shame like a second skin. Outside, Clarice was laughing with the girls by the window, no longer even pretending to be subtle. Did you see how she said he builds empires? Please, if she's marrying a king, I'm the Pope. One of the girls scrolled through her phone. Wait, what if she's one of those sugar baby TikTok girls? You know, the ones who fake rich boyfriends for clout? Clarice snorted. She's too old. Maybe someone's aunt trying to go viral. More laughter. Lily closed her eyes. The gown around her felt heavier by the second. She reached for the zipper, but it caught halfway, the lace snagging on itself. She tugged again. Nothing. A sudden knock on the door made her flinch. Everything all right in there? Clarice's voice, mock concern. I can come help if you're struggling. Lily's voice came out steady. I've got it. But the zipper wouldn't move. Another buzz from her phone, another call. This time, the screen lit up with his full name, Alex Stanton. She stared at it, and then, just before it rang out, she hit decline. Not because she didn't want to hear his voice, but because hearing him now, in this space, in this moment, it would break her. Outside, Clarice whispered loudly to one of the girls. That's the third call. Maybe her boyfriend is wondering how long the fitting at Walmart takes. The girl giggled. Or maybe he found someone who doesn't dress like a farmhand. Lily pressed her palms to her thighs. Heat flushed beneath her skin, not from shame, but from something else rising slowly. Resolve. She stood, faced the mirror, and said softly to herself, "Let them have this moment. I'll have the last one." She yanked the zipper one last time, harder than she should have, and heard the faint tear of fabric give way. She sighed, folded the dress carefully, and opened the door. Clarice noticed immediately. That tear wasn't there before. Lily didn't blink. "I'll pay for it." "It's $7,000, Clarice said with theatrical disappointment. "I'm sure it is." Lily held her gaze. "Charge whatever you want. Just send the invoice to Alex Stanton." Silence fell. The name didn't register immediately, not fully, but Clarice's smile faltered. "I'm sorry. Who?" Lily tilted her head. "My husband. He builds empires." She handed over the dress, retrieved her coat, and walked past the pedestal, past the girls with the phones, past the racks of overpriced dreams. She didn't slam the door. She didn't say another word, but the name she left behind would echo longer than any insult in that room ever had. The door to Seraphine Bridal eased shut behind Lily, the chime swallowed by the sudden rush of wind outside. She walked quickly, her eyes on the ground, coat wrapped tightly around her body like armor. Across the street, the black car idled. Behind its tinted windows, Alex Stanton sat motionless, his jaw clenched so tightly his temples pulsed. He had been there for over an hour, parked in a discreet lane beneath the sycamore tree, watching everything through the glass storefront. The way Clarice smiled with her teeth, but not her eyes. The way the girls filmed and laughed, the way his wife stood alone in white under a chandelier that didn't deserve her. He hadn't meant to come. He had trusted that Lily's quiet strength would protect her from moments like this. But when her first message went unanswered and her call never came, he'd followed the GPS ping like a magnet, and now he couldn't unsee what he'd seen. He stepped out of the car the moment she passed the corner. She didn't see him. She was too lost in her own storm. Alex pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed. "Leonard," he said, voice clipped. "Initiate protocol Seraphine, effective immediately." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, that's a full freeze." "Are you sure?" Alex's voice was ice. "Every location, every account, and send the internal audit team. Top priority." He ended the call and walked toward the boutique. The staff inside didn't notice him at first. He was dressed simply, charcoal jacket, dark jeans, no tie. But there was something in the way he carried himself, like a man who never had to raise his voice to command a room. Clarice looked up just as he entered. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. We're closed for private fittings. You'll need to schedule a..." She trailed off. There was something in his face, familiar, dangerous. "Actually," Alex said calmly, "I believe your day just ended." A man in a navy suit appeared behind him, holding a leather binder. He whispered into Clarice's ear, her face drained of color. "What is this?" she asked, voice shaking. "This is Mr. Stanton," the man replied, "founder and primary shareholder of Stanton Group, owner of the Seraphine Bridal chain." Clarice's clipboard fell from her hands, clattering softly on the floor. The other girls froze in place. The laughter still half hung in their throats like icicles about to break. Alex didn't look at any of them. His eyes scanned the boutique, the rack where Lily stood, the pedestal where she'd been mocked, the dressing room where her voice had gone silent. "Effective immediately," he said, turning to Clarice. "This location is shut down for review. I suggest you spend the rest of your afternoon preparing your resignation." Clarice stammered. I didn't know. If I had known she was worthy of respect," Alex cut in. "You wouldn't have known that even if she wore a crown." He turned to leave, but paused. "You judged her by the shoes she wore. I judged you by how you treated someone when you thought she had nothing." As he stepped outside, the wind picked up again. The same door chime rang, but this time, it didn't sound so proud. Inside, Clarice's legs buckled slightly. Someone whispered, "Did that really just happen?" But the truth had already arrived, and it was only getting started. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the Seraphine Bridal Boutique on Fifth Avenue, once a shining sanctuary of elegance, was locked behind steel shutters, its grand window displays stripped bare of satin and sparkle. A single sheet of paper taped to the glass read, temporarily closed for executive audit by order of Stanton Group. Staff members gathered outside in hushed confusion, cell phones buzzing with unanswered calls and unread messages. Clarice stood among them, wrapped in her wool coat, sunglasses barely hiding the panic etched into her face. She hadn't slept. Not after yesterday. Not after the man she'd dismissed with a sneer turned out to be the one signing her paychecks. Or worse, the husband of the woman she had humiliated. Inside the building, a team of corporate auditors moved like silent ghosts through every corner, inspecting records, interviewing staff, reviewing camera footage. They weren't bridal consultants. They were executioners in suits, sent not to fix, but to expose. By noon, 3 Seraphine locations across the city had received the same notice. By evening, social media was already swirling with theories. One former intern posted anonymously on Reddit. Word is, someone mistreated the CEO's wife without knowing it. Now, heads are rolling. Another TikTok showed the boutique being shuttered, overlaid with the caption, "When you mess with a queen dressed in cotton, the empire strikes back." The original video of Lily trying on dresses, quietly enduring the laughter, had gone viral overnight. Clarice's voice could be heard in the background, mocking her posture, her shoes, her worth. The comments were ruthless. That consultant should be fired. She had no idea who she was talking to, and even if Lily wasn't his wife, the cruelty was disgusting. Meanwhile, at the Stanton Group headquarters, a different kind of reckoning was unfolding. Alex sat at the head of a polished conference table, his demeanor calm but unreadable. "Seraphine was built to be a place of dreams," he said, voice low. "But it's become a place of judgment. That changes now." His team looked up, alert. "We're not shutting the brand down, we're taking it back. Dress by dress, store by store. Effective immediately, every employee undergoes empathy training. All management is suspended pending review. No one who treated my wife with disrespect will continue to wear a badge that bears our name." He paused. "And if anyone has a problem with that, there's the door." Back at home, Lily sat on their porch, sipping tea as the wind moved gently through the trees. She had seen the video, but not the comments. She didn't need validation from strangers. But what comforted her most was the silence between the chaos, the way Alex had kissed her hand that morning before leaving, not as a billionaire defending his name, but as a man who refused to let his wife stand alone. Her phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She picked it up. "Is this Lily Stanton?" a nervous voice asked. "This is Clarice. I didn't know. I'm sorry." Lily waited a moment before answering. "I'm not upset because you didn't know who I was. I'm upset because you didn't care who I could have been." She ended the call before Clarice could respond. Sometimes, silence is the loudest sentence. 3 days after the shutdown, just as the dust began to settle over Seraphine's scandal, a new kind of message arrived. Sleek black envelopes, each sealed with a golden crest, delivered by hand to every regional manager, top-selling consultant, and preferred client of the Bridal brand. Clarice received hers mid-afternoon, slipped through the mail slot like a secret. She opened it with trembling fingers and read aloud, "Stanton Group cordially invites you to the Winter Legacy Gala, a celebration of elegance, excellence, and rebirth." At the bottom, in embossed silver letters, dress code, formal, venue, Stanton Conservatory, attendance required for all Seraphine leadership. Her hands trembled. At first she thought it was a trap, but then doubt gave way to desperate hope. Maybe this was a second chance. Maybe Alex Stanton wasn't the type to hold grudges. Maybe they could fix this. Clarice rushed to call the other consultants, her voice tinged with relief. "They're hosting a gala. That means he's not shutting us down completely. We just need to show up, look the part, and prove we belong." The boutique girls spent the next few days borrowing dresses, rehearsing smiles, and practicing lines in the mirror. Lines of apology, of explanation, of rebranding themselves as misunderstood. But what none of them knew was that the gala wasn't a second chance. It was a mirror, and Alex Stanton was about to let the world watch as they faced their own reflection. The night of the gala arrived like a page from a dream. The Stanton Conservatory shimmered in gold and glass, filled with orchestral music and champagne flutes that never emptied. Guests arrived in designer gowns, stepping out of luxury sedans onto a red carpet dusted with white rose petals. Clarice walked in confidently, flanked by 2 of her former co-workers. They posed for photos, shook hands with strangers, and whispered among themselves, wondering if the CEO would make an appearance. "He might not even remember us," one said. "We weren't that important." "Exactly," Clarice replied, adjusting her diamond necklace. "That means we blend in." But at 8:40 p.m., the lights dimmed. A single spotlight cut through the glass ceiling, illuminating the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom. And then, from the top step, descended a figure in white. She didn't need an announcement. She didn't need an introduction. She was the storm they didn't see coming. And she wore silence like a crown. Lily. Her gown was a breathtaking shade of ivory silk, cut clean with a silhouette that whispered class louder than any jewel could scream. Her hair was pinned back in waves, her steps graceful but unflinching. And on her arm, walking proudly beside her, was Alex Stanton himself, undeniably the same man who had stood silently behind the glass days ago. The man who now looked at his wife like the world disappeared behind her. The ballroom froze. Clarice felt her throat tighten. One of the girls gasped audibly. Another dropped her clutch to the marble floor, but none of them moved. The MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Stanton, visionaries, partners, and the heart behind the Stanton legacy." Applause echoed, uncertain and staggered. Then a screen lowered behind them. A screen that began playing a video without warning. The boutique, the pedestal, the sneers. Clarice's voice mocking, the girls laughing, Lily standing alone. Gasps broke out. Someone whispered, "Is that?" And Clarice knew. This wasn't a gala. It was the reckoning. The footage rolled for only 90 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Clarice's voice echoed through the ballroom, every mocking syllable slicing through the air with surgical precision. "You can't afford it if it tears," she'd said, now immortalized on a 30-foot screen before industry elites, media figures, and powerful investors. Gasps turned to murmurs. A few phones rose, filming. Others stared, wide-eyed, as the girls from the boutique, now seated in designer gowns, sank lower into their seats. Then the screen went black, and silence swallowed the room whole. Alex took a step forward, his expression unreadable, his arms still wrapped gently around Lily's waist. "That woman in the video," he said, voice calm but resonant, stood alone under the weight of judgment, not because she lacked money, but because she lacked armor. He paused, letting the stillness stretch. But she didn't need armor, because what she carried was dignity, something no price tag can buy, and something this brand will now be built upon. He turned toward Lily. "My wife, Lily Stanton, is the soul of this company from this moment forward." Applause didn't erupt. It hesitated, stuttered, then swelled. Not the thunderous clapping of sycophants, but something real, something ashamed, something human. Clarice stood. Her face was pale, hands trembling. "Please, I didn't know who she was. If I had known..." "You'd have treated her better." Lily's voice was steady, neither vengeful nor cold. "That's not a compliment. That's the problem." Clarice tried again. I was under pressure. I made a mistake." Lily tilted her head. "Mistakes are human. Cruelty is learned. You didn't just dismiss me. You taught others how to." One of the boutique girls burst into tears and fled the ballroom. Another clutched her clutch so tightly her knuckles turned white. But Lily didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply walked to the center of the stage and took the microphone. "I grew up sewing hand-me-downs in the back of a thrift shop. I used to iron gowns I wasn't allowed to try on, and I promised myself, if I ever had the chance, I'd create a world where no girl would ever be made to feel like she didn't belong in white." She turned slightly, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. "This isn't about revenge. This is about rebuilding. So, if you clapped for me tonight, I hope you clap just as hard for the next girl who walks in wearing cotton shoes." A hush fell, and then, slowly, someone stood, then another. Then the whole room rose in a standing ovation. Not for wealth, not for power, but for a woman who refused to let shame define her. Back at their table, Clarice sat frozen, tears smudging her mascara. She wasn't escorted out. She wasn't shouted at. But in the quiet turning of heads away from her, she knew. That night, Lily didn't need a throne. The truth had already given her one. The gala had shifted. The music softened. The lights dimmed just enough to blur the tension still crackling in the corners of the room. Guests whispered not about fashion or champagne, but about dignity, justice, and the quiet storm that had just unfolded on stage. Near the marble fountain, Clarice sat alone, her champagne untouched, her hands restless in her lap. Her mind played the video back in slow motion, over and over, each line from her own mouth now echoing like a confession. She had been exposed, not by vengeance, but by grace, and somehow that hurt worse. She watched as Lily moved effortlessly through the crowd, not with superiority, but serenity, receiving respectful nods from people who, hours ago, didn't know her name. She didn't glow because of wealth. She glowed because she had nothing left to hide. Clarice stood abruptly, clutching her small purse like it could protect her from herself. She crossed the ballroom, weaving past tables and murmured stares until she stood before Lily, who was speaking gently with a young intern from the Stanton Foundation. Clarice waited. Lily looked up. Their eyes met. "May I?" Clarice asked, her voice small, almost brittle. Lily nodded once. The intern stepped aside. "I was wrong," Clarice said, trying to keep her voice from cracking. "I was cruel, and I was proud of it. I didn't know who you were, but that's not the point. It was never the point." She looked down, then up again, eyes shining. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. I needed to say it, out loud." Lily watched her for a moment, not coldly, not triumphantly, just honestly. "Thank you," she said softly. "It takes courage to apologize." Clarice's shoulders relaxed slightly, but Lily continued. "But apology doesn't erase impact. And sometimes it's not about whether I forgive you. It's about whether you'll be different the next time someone walks in who doesn't look the part." Clarice nodded quickly. "I will, I promise." "Good," Lily replied, her voice calm but steady. "Then start there. Not for me, for the next girl." Across the room, others followed. A boutique assistant who once laughed with a phone in her hand now approached with tears in her eyes and a whispered, "I'm sorry." A regional manager who had ignored Lily's presence that day now looked her in the eye and said, "I failed you, I failed this brand, but your words tonight changed something." But Lily didn't offer absolution like a priest. She offered boundaries, a smile, a nod, and sometimes silence. Later that night, as the gala wound down and guests slipped into the arms of velvet limousines, Lily stood beside Alex beneath the starlit canopy outside the conservatory. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice quiet. "I did," Alex answered, lacing his fingers through hers. "Not to defend you, but to remind them, and the world, what real strength looks like." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "It didn't feel like strength in that dressing room. It felt like drowning. But you didn't," he said. "You stood, and tonight you helped others rise too." She closed her eyes, breathed in the scent of the evening. Roses, night air, something softer than power, but deeper than pride. The kind of peace that only comes when truth is no longer hidden. The days after the gala brought headlines and hashtags, but Lily stayed quiet. She declined interviews, turned down talk show invites, and ignored agents offering book deals. She didn't want fame. She wanted something that couldn't be televised. Change. Deep, structural, lasting change. And she had a plan. One morning, a memo went out across the Stanton Group. Seraphine Bridal would launch a new division, designed and led by Lily herself, offering affordable couture gowns to underprivileged brides. It would employ seamstresses from women's shelters, former foster girls, and immigrant tailors. Each gown would carry a single-stitched label inside. "You are worthy." The internet went wild. Influencers raved. But what stunned everyone most was Lily's first press conference. She stood at the podium in a cream blazer and jeans, no jewelry, no entourage. "When I was 9, she began, "I used to sit on the floor of a thrift shop and sew beads onto secondhand veils. My foster mother ran a donation bin behind the shop, and when the bin overflowed, I got to keep the scraps." She paused, smiling faintly. "I learned early that beauty wasn't in price tags. It was in care, in attention, in the courage to wear something that made you feel seen, even when no one else saw you." Then she looked up, her gaze steady. "I'm not ashamed I walked into Seraphine in cotton shoes. I'm proud of it, because I came from a world that taught me how to walk with nothing and still carry grace." Journalists blinked, stunned. A woman who had everything now had revealed she came from nothing. The moment people realized Lily hadn't just survived humiliation. She'd once survived hunger, foster care, rejection. And the man who married her hadn't chosen her for status or surface. He'd seen through it all, because once, long ago, he'd been there too. Backstage, Alex watched her speak, remembering the rainy day they first met, when she handed him an umbrella outside a soup kitchen, thinking he was just another volunteer. He had followed her kindness like a thread ever since. Not because he needed saving, but because she made the world feel like it could be stitched back together. That evening, as Lily returned home, she found a parcel on their doorstep. Inside was a tiara, not diamonds, but hand-twisted silver wire and pearls, wrapped in tulle. A note was tucked inside. For the bride who taught the world that crowns aren't worn, they're earned. With love, the women of Shelter 14. Lily held it for a long time, fingers tracing the delicate loops. She didn't cry. She just smiled, because in that moment, she understood. Her crown wasn't gold. It was every girl who would now walk into a fitting room and be treated like she mattered. That was her true legacy. That was her true crown. The wedding was never meant to be a spectacle, but the world had already decided otherwise. Invitations weren't sent to celebrities or socialites. Instead, they went to the seamstresses Lily had trained, to the foster children she'd met on speaking tours, to the barista who once gave her a free muffin when she had nothing in her wallet, and to the janitor who always left roses on her office desk without ever signing a name. The venue was the old conservatory at the edge of the Stanton estate, once used only for press galas, now transformed into a glass garden of white orchids and golden light. No flashing cameras, no red carpet, just strings of soft music, the scent of lavender in the breeze, and 100 faces that knew Lily not as a symbol, but as a soul. Lily walked down the aisle alone, not because no one wanted to walk with her, but because she had walked so many roads by herself that this moment, this final quiet path, belonged to her. Her gown was one she had designed herself, made from reclaimed silk and pearl-stitched lace, crafted by women who once doubted they had value. Every stitch was a story, every seam a second chance. Alex stood waiting, not in a tuxedo, but in a charcoal suit with a single cotton flower in his lapel, an homage to the shoes that started it all. When their eyes met, the room faded, time folded in, and everything cruel, loud, and cynical in the world seemed to hush before them. They didn't exchange elaborate vows, just a glance, just a touch, and a promise whispered too soft for the crowd to hear. But everyone knew what it meant. After the ceremony, Lily stood under the canopy of lights, holding a cup of cider, when a young girl approached, no more than 16, in a thrifted dress and scuffed sneakers. She looked nervous. "Mrs. Stanton," she said, eyes wide. I never thought someone like me could feel beautiful. But after watching what you did, I walked into a boutique last week, and I stood tall. Because you did." Lily knelt slightly, took her hand, and said, "You never needed anyone's permission to feel beautiful. You just needed to remember you already are." The girl smiled, tears threatening, and somewhere behind them, the same boutique clerk who once filmed Lily now stood in the catering line, quiet, changed, learning. Redemption doesn't always arrive in applause. Sometimes it comes in silence and slow repair. That night, as guests began to leave, the world outside buzzed with posts, photos, and headlines. But none of it mattered to Lily. She sat on the steps of the conservatory barefoot, heels forgotten, leaning against Alex's shoulder. "Do you think they'll remember today?" she asked. He looked down at her, then out toward the garden, filled with people who had once been invisible. "They won't remember the flowers, or the food. They'll remember the bride who wore dignity like a gown." And they did. Not because she was perfect, but because she was human, and because in a world obsessed with crowns, she reminded them that sometimes the most powerful woman in the room is the one who walks in wearing cotton shoes, and never looks down. She never raised her voice, she never sought attention. But by the end, even those who once laughed had no choice but to stand. Because she taught them something deeper than status. She taught them the weight of kindness and the cost of cruelty. And now, every time a girl walks into a fitting room unsure of herself, she walks in a little taller, because someone once stood there before her in cotton shoes and quiet strength, and changed everything. This was not the story of a billionaire's wife. This was the story of a woman who reminded the world that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones we overlook, until it's too late.